everyone, and welcome to this week's Salon webinar, where we explore careers, research topics that matter to you. I'm Adam Smith, and I'll be your host for today's session. If you've ever been asked to give a talk in a school or take part in a science fair or explain your research to a curious young person, then you will know that talking science to children and young people is a unique challenge. It's not just about simplifying jargon or swapping out long words. It's about finding ways to spark curiosity, tell compelling stories, and make abstract ideas come to life. And today's theme is all about how to present your science in a way that's engaging and accessible and inspiring to younger audiences. From primary school pupils to curious teens, whether you're working in dementia, the brain, AI, or with molecules, this is your chance to learn how to share your work in ways that will stick. And we're joined by two shy yet brilliant speakers who are going to turn their cameras on, I hope. Hello. We have the incredible Rebecca Bright, who is a speech and language therapist and co-founder of Therapy Box, an award-winning company creating inclusive, accessible tech. Rebecca has years of experience in explaining complex ideas to children through technology and creative engagement. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you very much for joining us. And alongside Rebecca, we have the awesome Dr. Sarah-Naomi James, who is a neuroepidemiologist, also at UCL, funded by Alzheimer's Research UK, whose research explores how life course factors influence brain health. Sarah is also a passionate science communicator who's taken her research to festivals across the country, even turning it into a mini golf course, which we're going to learn more about today. So I'm sure many of you have joined us before, but I'll set the scene for how the format works. Both of our speakers are each going to present their thoughts for 10 minutes each. They've been given a very broad brief to talk about whatever they think is relevant to this topic. Then we're going to have some chat and some Q&A, and if you like, we can join you in the chat later on, but we'll see how that goes. But please do contribute your own suggestions if you've had experiences on this as well in the chat, or do ask questions if they come to you you've got two options. You've got chat and you've got Q&A buttons along the bottom of your screen. And if you're watching this later on from recorded on YouTube or in the community, please do post your comments. We'd always love to get those and your suggestions as well. But that's probably enough from me. I think Rebecca has kindly agreed to go first. So I'm going to hand over to Rebecca now, who's going to share her screen. Straight into it. Look at that, work first time. Thank you, Rebecca. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experience of talking about science to children. So just to give a little bit of background, as Adam said, I'm a speech and language therapist by background, and founded even an assistive technology company a number of years ago in 2008. So that's been my focus for a very long time, and building technology for speech and language therapists and for research as well, anything across cognition, language, and also a mum of two boys, 8 and 11, which there's lots of science talk at home. And I'm currently a PhD student in speech, hearing and phonetic sciences at UCL, looking at hearing and social participation and dementia. However, today I'm going to talk a little bit about how a project I was involved with was really all about encouraging children to participate in science. And so we had to talk to them a lot about science. And I thought it would be a really useful way to bring through some of the learning that we had and some tips that came about because of that. So this was an NIHR I4I funded project where the goal was to really develop an app that could be used by speech and language therapists to help identify children with developmental language disorder. And we wanted to look at their story retell skills and the way that often happens in speech language therapy is that children will tell a story or retell a story, and speech and language therapists will either manually transcribe that or perhaps, and even more so now, use tech to support them to do that, to look at the language they're using and perhaps the language that they're having trouble using. So it was really about building a story retelling app that we would use to do that. There were quite a number of studies done prior to our project which showed that while it was quite standard for therapists to gather language samples, these samples are often short, not recorded and analysed quite informally. And at that stage, this is before 2020, so things might have changed, only 12.5% were using computer-aided transcription. And no matter which way they did it, the biggest barrier that clinicians identified in doing this was time. So we wanted to build a semi-automated transcription of children's language samples to enable transcription of children's language samples, and we wanted to make it fun. But we needed to build an app which would elicit the story and then support the therapists in doing that. And we needed to find a way to build a story that was going to work across different groups, different ages, different backgrounds, and be engaging. And then we needed to gather samples to enable us to do the machine learning work that went behind it for the analysis of these stories. So that was our big challenge. We set about working with children from the beginning, including with my two boys. So we wanted to build an app that was going to have a story that would be engaging, and that took quite a lot of time. It started with brainstorming ideas with children's game developers, looking at things like space themes or jungle themes. And in the end, what we settled on through quite a lot of discussion with children in primary schools, for example, was an adventure story and a treasure search, or a hunt for treasure. And that seemed to be something that was universally understood by the children that we tested it with, that in some way or other they had an idea of going on an adventure to find treasure. So the story evolved from there, and we spent a lot of time working with children to find the right story. And also the right way that the voice would come across for the captain of the ship who introduced the app and the task to everybody, the animation that we used. The whole process was very much done collaboratively with children who quickly told us when they didn't like it, it was boring, or when the game that we had at the end as a reward, which was like a Flappy Birds kind of game, when that was too hard and frustrating and made them annoyed. And they had some brilliant ideas, like they wanted to be able to listen back themselves to the story, not just, have the story go on to the researchers, but the kids wanted to hear their story back and maybe listen to it later. So these were really important things that we learned from the children that we worked with in the schools. We then needed to gather language samples from around the country, and this was in 2020, and so in the summer. In some ways, that worked out really well for our project because we needed to gather 600 samples, which were stratified across demographic bins for age, postcode, and gender. So we needed to be quite specific. So we needed quite a lot of samples to fill those 600 bins. And we were very, very fortunate that the project had also won a prize, a Vroom Award, and we were able to have billboards on bus stops all around the country, and that was done very cleverly. So with the designers that worked for JC Decaux, to find a way to explain our goal or the science that we wanted to do to children and families. And so they did a brilliant job. And I actually think because we worked with them, we were able to find the best way to get our message across. And so rather than saying we're doing a big citizen science project, we need children to do a language sample, and this is because we're looking at developmental language disorder. No, really the goal was, and their advice was, strip it right back to be something very simple, a message that people are going to understand. So it ended up being tell one story now, help thousands of children tomorrow. And then a very simple call to action, which was download to change how we understand language development. And then down at the bottom were the logos of all the partners that were involved, the NIHR. And this message then went onto these billboards all around the country. And they had strategically identified where there would be the most traffic from families and children. And even though it was in lockdown, it was still, in places where people would be most likely to go past. So still in neighborhoods where there were schools or parks. And so they were placed to maximize the footfall that would go past them. So that was an absolutely amazing opportunity that we had to try to get our message across to people and to families and children around the country. And they designed these beautiful graphics that helped us really get our message across. We also benefited from media coverage of that as well. So again, the call to action was really simple, which was parents are being asked, to tell one story now and help children tomorrow. So that became sort of the call to action, and I think helped families and children to get on board with that. And so that managed to work, and as I said, probably benefited from being done during that period where families were at home and looking for something to do potentially, or something that they saw as positive that they could do on an app or on a tablet. And the app was downloaded over 4,000 families, and we were able to collect the samples we needed to fill those bins. And we did ask people whether they enjoyed the app, and of those that completed the survey, over 91% of children reported they enjoyed using it. And anecdotally, people said, "Yeah, it's great. We're listening back to the story that we told," or we've shown it to another family. We're sharing it with our friends. So that was a good way for that for the science to spread. As I said, what really helped, I think, was having a simple message, probably a broader message. So talking about language development, because that was of interest to everybody. We didn't try to tackle explaining what developmental language disorder was in our top line communication about science, but people could certainly find out more about that on the website, for example. The call to action was clear and easy. We made it really easily findable on the App Store, and easy to find from the ads that we had. And I think the other big thing that helped was that we designed the app from the beginning with children. So we made sure it was fun. And that being able to hear your own story back was a feature that came back from the children. And that was really popular when we rolled it out in the end. And that meant that I think families and children really enjoyed using it and told other families, so that we were able to convey and share our message more broadly. So in summary, I think children were able to help us design our fun citizen science app. That really helped us have an engaging project and helped us gather the samples that we needed. And by focusing on the bigger picture, I think that made it easier, along with the call to action being really simple. So with that, I'll pause and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Rebecca. You took this in an entirely in a direction I wasn't expecting at all, which has raised a whole bunch of new questions for me, actually, which is because when I first thought about this topic, I thought we were going to get, dads and mums who had been asked to go into school, that kind of bring your parent to school day and talk to them about what you do. But of course, citizen science is, I suppose, in this area that we're looking at in this dementia, it's increasingly important because we're talking about how children understand what's going on with older members of the families, and increasingly now brain health as well, and how important it is to think about brain health from as early an age as we possibly can. What role, I mean, how did you go about involving children in the design? Because again, we talk about patient and public involvement quite a lot now in research, but then we always tend to focus on older people. How do you go about doing PPI with younger people? Which I guess it makes sense that we should do that. You know, if you're going to go talk to a bunch of young people, we can test things on our own children for those that have them. But how do you go about PPI in that audience that you're targeting? Sorry, that was a long way to get to that question.
Yes, absolutely. So we worked with a couple of schools in Hackney that we were partnering with the speech and language therapy teams there anyway. So it was identifying some schools who felt they'd be interested, and really, I think it's quite similar to doing PPI with adults, maybe more fun. We took along things like pencil cases and badges. So there were certainly fun things to, for the children to take away. And it wasn't just the researchers that it went in, it was the designers and the developers as well, really watching how children engaged with the apps, what feedback they have, and that really helped the whole team to think about how the app was being used, and then to test different iterations of it as we went along. So it was really key, and listening to parents about what they liked. Like I said, hearing the story back was something we hadn't planned, but that was really a positive outcome. And I think people felt that then they took away something from the citizen science as well. So that came out of the PPI work at the beginning. And it's just trying to talk to a range of children and parents, rather than just the children of speech and language therapists or researchers who might be, who have certain, obviously exposed to these things at home, perhaps. So it was good to talk to a whole, a mixed range of children.
And how do you adapt your language then? I guess if you've a speech and language therapist, you might have had the opportunity to work with children before. Not everybody who's watching today will have really necessarily worked with children, but I wonder how you adapt language to make sure you're kind of not, I mean, I suppose talking down to the audience, although we say the same thing with older people as well, we don't want to talk down to people, about how you adapt to change your language.
I think in this case, it was really about keeping it quite broad and talking more about language and language development in general, and about learning how different kids talk, and so rather than drilling too much into the specifics of in this case developmental language disorder, or having that information available, but keeping it quite broad and general to make sure that everybody was on board with the general idea and the general science that was going on and why that was useful. So I think it's about not being afraid to go too wide in that messaging to begin with, to at least make sure everybody's sort of being caught in that concept. I think that would be something that we took away from working with younger people in PPI, but probably applicable for everybody.
But yeah, and I can see how having an opportunity to maybe observe a classroom and things like that, if you've not worked with children before, trying to get the opportunity to observe a classroom so you can hear how the TAs and the teachers interact with children, to learn some lessons before you dive straight into that, I can see being important. I have some stats here. I'm going to read out some stats and then we're going to go to Sarah. So only 14% of children aged 7 to 14 say that they know a scientist personally. Actually, that's more than I thought it would be, to be honest. Although where I live, you can't throw a stone without hitting a scientist, because I'm right next door to Harwell, but they're always like physicists and people like that, or, geneticists. Studies show that science engagement in early years strongly predicts future interest in STEM careers. So people who are under the age of 12 who've shown interest in science are far more likely to keep that interest through life, rather than it's quite hard to develop later on, I think the research showed. And then here we are. The average attention span of a 10-year-old is apparently 20 minutes. did longer than I thought it would be, but it's 20 minutes if the content is interactive. Research shows. So there you go. Keep your talks, if you're doing this, your interactions, the activity, to about 20 minutes long. No 1 hour workshops that we might do with adults. That's enough from me for now, and thank you very much, Rebecca. We'll come back for more questions. Do pop your questions in the chat and we will get to those afterwards. But now we're going to hear from Sarah. Sarah, I don't know if I'll hand over to you, and then you tell me when you want me to share the thing you want me to share.
Yeah, so that is a really complimentary talk there, because I'm going to be talking about the other side of science communication, which is trying to convey our findings and our important aspects of what we know about brain health to children. And instinctively, you know, presumably everyone on this call is interested in dementia to some extent. And the natural audience, you don't necessarily think about children and young people, but the message actually needs to be throughout your life course. You know, we need to look after our brains when we're younger, and because we think it's important for brain health when we're older, but also it's good at all points. So we really do need to kind of adapt our messaging. So it's not just all about dementia and trying to think about, you know, young people. When we've done work with them, they don't necessarily want to think about dementia, or, you know, find it quite a sad topic. But actually, we need to reframe it, trying to think about, you know, looking after your brain health and what that could mean for your later brain health as well. So, and some of the science engagement work that I've been trying to do is trying to get this message across and get people interested in their brains, because it feels more intuitive for especially like adolescents, people who are starting to get a bit more self-conscious about the way that they look, that they can be a bit more open to the idea of like looking after your heart health and things like that, but not many people think about your brain health. So some of my work has been trying to understand what we can do to engage younger people in those conversations. And a lot of it is, it has parallels with Rebecca's work, trying to engage people in the research in the first place, which is all around making it relatable to what they care about and know about in those moments in time. So what I want Adam to show is an example of this. So I reached out to an artist a couple of years ago who is like a immersive theatre artist. She writes plays and things like that. Because I felt like I, as a researcher, didn't necessarily have the skills to find something fun to use as a starting point to talk about this idea about brain health and what's good for you. And so that's been and I can talk more about that later if that's of interest, but the idea of trying to kind of use my knowledge and of the science, but use somebody else in terms of the artist to collaborate together to create something that really helps convey some of our messages. So Adam now is going to show an example of this video, which was sorry. This video is the creation element between collaboration between this artist. So we'll speak about it later.
I'm Rachel Briscoe. I'm Creative Director of Fanshen. Fanshen make creative interventions which are playful and participatory, and we've made Life Course Golf Course in a collaboration with some scientists from UCL.
Together, we've come up with this idea of a fun way to engage people in our research, which is Life Course Golf Course. So you might be able to see it behind me. So the idea is crazy golf, which everybody knows how to play, but each theme is around something different that we study in the Life Course. So some of them are about things like stressful life events, some of the things are about bone health, so trying to capture both like biological as well as social things.
I think what works really well and what we try and do in quite a lot of our work is to create something that's instantly recognizable and accessible, so everyone knows what a mini golf course is. Like, oh, it's a mini golf. And then you can do it. And the science is kind of added on rather than what is this, what do I have to do, is it going to be weird? So I think that sort of format works really well.
I think this is one of the best things we've done.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's really, like, I love how everyone's in character, and they're really good fun obstacles, especially like if you have to wear the glasses so you're partially sighted, or if you've got to wear the boxing gloves, so it makes it really tricky. Yeah. It's so well thought out.
But we just got through.
We got through them, yeah. That was good.
I think a lot of it was sort of like, obviously, like kind of obvious things, but maybe things that you take for granted, like you don't think about. And something and visually seeing it definitely like makes it a bit easier to understand.
It's been great working with the scientists, yeah, because they've all been really up for having a good time and treating the whole thing as a bit of a game, and yeah, they've all been engaging with the audience, with the public, really well.
The public have been absolutely fantastic. I think they've both enjoyed the concept of just playing golf, but hopefully we've been able to instill in them some knowledge about why life force epidemiology is important for their general health, and actually making them think about how early life has affected later life. And even for the kids, maybe, even if they pick up a different size ball and say, well, that represents a different social circumstance, having something like that is really interesting and great.
In terms of engaging the public with life course studies, we were actually at Greenland last year, but with a completely different task. This is the first time that we've integrated it with golf, and it's a really fun way for people to learn, and I think they're taking different things out from it. So some of the adults are taking different things out from the kids, and I think it'll be really fascinating to see what they think as well.
I suppose in a sense it is quite thought-provoking. I like the fact that when you know, that like different balls kind of represent different circumstances, and like I can see how the game can kind of represent life and some of the challenges of it.
I hadn't actually heard of life course studies, but once I started hearing about the scientists' research, it's really, really fascinating. The idea that you can follow a group of people throughout their whole lives, and the impact that that level of research can have on policy and on really important things like social inequality, that made us really excited about this project.
Share some slides a second as well. Oh no, I'm not. That's going to do too many things, and I didn't try it out in the session before. Okay, then I'll just talk. So what I wanted to kind of show there was that actually the starting point that we had of knowing how to play golf is really helpful. So if there's that's one tip that I've definitely learned, is having some kind of universal starting point. So if you have, and that could be anything, in this case is obviously very interactive, but it could be a universal starting point for a conversation that everybody can kind of relate to, and then you can tailor it based on their needs. So in this particular example, we were learning, like, each of the golf courses was themed around something different. So one of them was themed around like alcohol use, and so for some people, especially the younger children, that wasn't that applicable. So we would talk about other things that might not be so good for your brain, other things to drink. But everyone can kind of relate to it a little bit because they can play golf, and they also can know, oh yes, I like this drink or this drink. And you can then start the conversation from there. So have like a universal starting question, and you can kind of try to tailor their answers based on that, which was really helpful. The other thing is this idea of engaging people through play. And so I do a couple of like assemblies and go into schools and that kind of thing, where it's not as easy to be as hands-on, because you can't get all the children necessarily to hold a brain or something, but you can do other things, such as we often play memory games with the group, and things like digit span tasks that we'll often use as part of our dementia assessments, but actually giving it to these children in a group setting can be quite fun to try and get them to understand a little bit about cognition. So whatever it is, I think the starting point is to try and think of something interactive that they can all kind of engage with at any level, and then you can offshoot conversations from that. I think the other thing as well, lots of these lots of things in my experience has been not being fixated on getting well, having a very clear message about what you do want them to know, and don't worry if they don't get to know the details. So for instance, try and keep the message as simple as possible. So for in my case, it's things like, you know, physical activity is good for your brain, or certain diets are good for your brain. That's the message. That's all I care about. And if they want to know more, then I'm very happy to talk about more, but I don't want to bog them down in the details if it's not age appropriate, or perhaps if they're not even that interested. So as long as they know that one message, that will make me feel like it's a successful kind of interaction. And then the other thing is often giving people something to take away. So whether that would be in the setting of a school assembly, something like a pledge around what they might do to try to keep their brain healthy, or it could be some kind of freebie at some science engagement event. But I think all of these things just help people, especially young people, firstly engage in the first place, but also then hopefully will have a fun experience and make it a long-lasting impact on their enthusiasm for the subject as well. And I just wanted to raise as well as potentially another point we can talk about, but my confidence and experience has really come from doing it and speaking to children and young people, especially because, you know, when we're talking about children and young people, it could be anything below the age of 20. Like, and you do have to tailor conversations differently according to their level of understanding and age. And so there's actually lots of like training opportunities available often through institutions. I know UCL does, but some of the charities do it as well. And I've actually volunteered both for Alzheimer's Research UK and Alzheimer's Society as a science communicator. So I can put some of those links in the chat if anyone's interested, that you can ask them to be kind of put on a mailing list, that if when they do have events, science communication events, whether that's something that you would like to be part of, and they sometimes offer training as part of that as well. So I think if you're kind of starting out and you don't necessarily know how to engage with people, having experience through like an existing scheme, like through the charities work, is a really good idea, because you can kind of learn off other people and you don't necessarily have to come up with the idea yourself. You can just kind of help them. And then in turn, that hopefully will give you the confidence to think about your own ideas as well. So yeah, that's some of my ramblings, Adam, but I'm very happy to pick up any of those threads now.
Thank you, Sarah. That was brilliant. I love the mini golf. That's really cool. I wish I could have. I would have definitely enjoyed that. Where did that idea come from? I mean, was that the people you worked with?
Yeah, so it was the artist really, because when we were talking about, you know, we want to get a message about dementia and brain health, but we want to do it to young people. And she was like, well, that's a very hard challenge, you know, how do we get that and convey that? But it was also about the setting as well. We knew that we wanted to do it in a festival setting, so we knew we wanted something big and interactive. And so the idea of having like a themed golf course around, so the people kind of start, I think there were seven, oh, I don't know my golf language, sorry. There were 7, what are they called?
Golf.
Yeah, holes, there we go. Thank you. And each one was a different aspect of kind of life course risk. And so it just gave us an opportunity to, on each one of those holes, to talk to the people about it. So we had a facilitator at each hole to kind of talk people through why we think those things are good or bad. So the golf, in a way, was kind of a distraction, because everyone could kind of do it, and also that kind of task where you do take it in turn. So, you know, the parent would be doing it and we could talk to the child and vice versa. So in a way, the game became like just something you do, and actually it was the conversation that was quite fulfilling.
I know when I used to have to do things at school, well, a long time ago now, doing things at schools, quite often I'd work backwards, actually. Rather than trying to find the activity that suited the topic, I'd start with the activity and then somehow try to manipulate it to suit the topic. I'd find an activity that I knew that they'd want to do, like, you know, building something or drawing something. When I asked my daughter in preparation for this discussion today, does she remember anything from from school, anything she had to do, and everything she seemed to remember was when she'd been asked to kind of come home and make a diorama and also as well, those things, you're not allowed to throw them away either, so they kind of lived on at home forever. So if you can get the children to make something at school, air clay, something that isn't easily thrown away, and then bring it home, it carried the conversation on at home as well. It stuck around for a while, and they were the things that were really memorable. That and the person coming with an eagle to school that bit one of the children. But I don't suppose not everybody can take. They were a main thing she remembered from primary school. I don't know. I don't know if you've from your experiences, I don't know if you've have either of you had a chance to go into a classroom or talk to? You have you had things go wrong, things that didn't work, and things that you found that did? I don't know, Rebecca, if you're nodding.
Actually, what went wrong, it was probably the best bit, actually, because I'd gone in to talk to one of my son's classes. He must have been in about year 3 or 4, about it was about talking about women in science and technology, and I was talking about all the jobs you could do in a technology company that you might not know existed. So just sort of to draw awareness to the range of roles, and I would show the different people in our team. I'd say this person is a user experience designer, so they're helping us design how to make the apps useful for people. Here's some computer, some software engineers. Here's an AI, machine learning expert. And I showed them, and I said, what? And at that stage, a lot of our team were male. And so the idea was, where are the women? What other, did you know these jobs existed? And that was when people, and then they said, but where, you haven't shown us who's the person that runs the company. And it was actually, and I hadn't planned this. I said, well, that's me. So that again was showing that women in science. I hadn't planned that. My plan was to show, here's all the jobs you could do. So actually that question at the end that sort of caught me off guard was, maybe the thing people went home with and said, actually, a woman runs a technology company. This is great. So it wasn't that I planned it, and it was a question that sort of caught me off guard, but in the end probably had the most impact.
What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I've been into a couple of schools, both primary and secondary, to give talks about brain health, and so I kind of talk about how we measure it, and then why we think it's important. And I guess the lessons that I learned, so I am quite sensitive to thinking about the audience age, because what might be of interest to an 8-year-old is very different to a 14-year-old. And so, actually being able to have sensible conversations about smoking and alcohol with 14-year-olds is actually way more appropriate and also interesting for them as well than an 8-year-old. So it's not a lesson, because I kind of knew that ahead of time. I did tailor my talk, luckily, but just trying to be aware of what might be relevant for those people in that moment in time. And I guess, it's the questions that kind of make you don't know what's going to come. But it's also challenging, and I think it's okay to say I don't know, or that's an excellent question, and let me follow up with your teacher, or that kind of thing. So I think this is the other thing about science communication, you don't have to know all the answers, and I think actually that honesty with young people is actually quite refreshing for them sometimes. So I definitely have not been able to answer everything, and I think that's a good thing to admit.
You mentioning there about it being a very different talking to a group of 18-year-olds compared to a group of 14-year-olds. Did you find, because I remembering back to when my daughter was little, that I don't know if it was just her or a year group, but also as well I found that the boys were very different from the girls as well in terms of their interests and how they interacted with each other. And I mean, they didn't even, there was very little interaction between them. And I wonder how important it is to make sure that your talk has got something for everybody in there. I don't want to say that there aren't exceptions, that there aren't, you know, this isn't a gender discussion about, you know, boys and girls and differences, but I wonder about how you cater to all the different people in the classroom.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think it comes back to that starting point of what is your universal question. So, you know, there might be differences in what kind of sports people like to do, but at the end of the day, the question could be the same for both men and women, or, you know, whatever. So I think there is definitely, so the head injury work does seem that I do does seem to get more interest from boys trying to think about, you know, their impact of heading footballs and rugby and that kind of thing. So I think it's just about being aware and having universal questions that anyone can answer. They don't need to have any kind of assumed knowledge, or, you know, everybody's got a favorite food, and then we can go off on a tangent then about, you know, well, do you think it's good or bad for you? Do you think that's good or bad for your brain? So just, I think it's getting that universal starting point where everyone can kind of at least relate to, even though their answers might be different.
I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Rebecca.
No, I agree. I think it's Sarah-Naomi is saying, that I think it's starting with the understanding that you think people might share, or even checking that that's the understanding. So if I talk about speech and hearing, you know, it's making sure that everybody's on, we're starting at the same point in our discussion, and then going where the children want to take it. And I think, yeah, perhaps at primary school, I've only spoken to children at primary school level, but they seem to, both boys and girls, engage with the topic from, you know, in a similar way I experienced.
I've actually just remembered something that didn't go wrong, but is relevant to this topic, where I was talking about the importance of sex and thinking about, you know, dementia and brain health. But my understanding, thinking about men and women, but of course to an audience of teenagers, they think about that very differently. So I had to catch myself and, like, again, just acknowledge it that I was
even as you're talking. We
talk all the time about sex differences, things like that. That's just part of our language, that we know that what we're talking about, but yeah, teenagers don't. So and actually then that opened up an interesting conversation. So maybe we should be, you know, thinking about, you know, relationships. And so, yeah, it was a tangent I did not expect, but one that actually was really welcome, and also made them listen to what I was saying. So,
I think also as well, doing some background. So, I mean, like we talked about before, having a chance to observe children in their natural habitat, to hear those conversations. Also as well, some cultural references, because one of the top tips from reading the content on our website that I came up with was about using analogies is particularly good. So comparing neurons to spaghetti, or memory to filing cabinets, or things like this, that works. And if you're up to date on your cultural references, you know that, you know, small children watch Bluey now and it's not In the Night Garden anymore, or that teenagers stopped playing Fortnite, or actually, will they ever stop playing Fortnite or Minecraft? Whatever is the newest thing. I think do a little bit of prep to get your analogies right for whatever is relevant at the time, and recognize that what was relevant a year ago might not even be relevant anymore. So do keep up to date on those. We've got a couple of audience questions, which let's get to those. We've got a question from Russell, who asks for both speakers, if we had to prioritize between getting children to understand the science and getting kids excited to listen, which would you focus on? So excited, or getting, I'm guessing you're going to say ideally both, right? But what do you think? Sarah, you're unmuted.
I'm just trying to process it. So we're saying, is it better for their understanding or their enthusiasm, I presume? And I would say their enthusiasm, because that's where the questions will flourish and then turn into understanding. And there's a big difference, like it's the same thing, isn't it? Like we often criticize the education system for just kind of learning things for the sake of it for an exam, or there's a big difference between understanding and actually then the enthusiasm for it, which makes it take on a whole new level. And if we are, for what the purpose of what I'm trying to do is get them to have this understanding for their whole of their lives, looking after your brain is important when you're a child and all the way throughout your life. You want people to know that and to take it seriously.
And you're not there as a teacher, are you? You're not there to kind of instill some knowledge that they're then going to be future, tested on in the future. It's just, isn't it about introducing concepts and ideas to get them thinking, to give them enough that they might go away and have a conversation with their parents or do some research for themselves, or to inform something else? Not that they need to have a detailed understanding of how smoking affects the brain, just enough that smoking affects the brain negatively is the message. They don't need to know the how, I guess.
They can come and be researchers and help us find out the how.
Well, I remember my daughter, Horrible Histories was one of my favourite shows to watch with my daughter. Those little facts and she wouldn't memorize those like anything. She could still recall back to you funny little facts from Horrible Histories from 15 years ago because they'd been made funny or they'd been made interesting. I think children have an incredible capacity for memorizing these things. So I don't know, Rebecca, if you have anything to add.
My two boys love listening to science podcasts, and I think that's one of the things we often put on at home or in the car to try and get them away from other things. But then I noticed the teachers might say they've got a lot of knowledge, which must mean that they spout out all of these, interesting facts that they pick out. And I think that's what's
not just about dinosaurs.
Oh, dinosaurs is a big one in our house still, but space and dinosaurs and all those sorts of things that capture their imagination, I think, of and then they move on to topics that they might not have naturally gravitated to. But I think there's so many lovely science podcasts out there that have done really well and are funny, and have maybe sometimes they have a bit of a mystery about trying to solve a problem, or encouraging that sort of mindset of thinking about a problem in a different way and working through it. Some of those, personally, I've conceived with my boys, that's something that really resonates with them and sparks that enthusiasm and excitement, I think, for science.
Imagine how impactful it would be if we could get the brain to be as interesting as dinosaurs.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't.
I think it is, Adam. I do.
Well, I agree, but I'm not sure it is to most children. But if we could get children as interested, and it's incredible, why dinosaurs? We need to make cartoon versions of the different parts of the brain that have the same personality as dinosaurs. Some cartoon. I think that I can see a future collaboration going on, making a dinosaur-style cartoon, which is about a family that live in the brain. That could be
like Inside Out. Have you seen that film?
Yeah, of course, Inside Out. Absolutely. I mean, that's been impactful, I imagine. We've got another question. Let's bring this question on. Your insights would be particularly valuable in designing studies on other neurodevelopmental disorders, example, autism, effectively. Do you have any additional insights on improving recruitment for behavioural studies, MRI, EEG, and other research involving children, young people, or adults? Interesting idea about converting that, that interest into potential recruitment. I don't see very many actual research studies into where about dementia. I get that this isn't all a question about dementia, that involve children themselves. Any thoughts?
I know that
Rebecca, I guess this is one more for you.
Yeah, and not that I that was the only project I've done with children, but I do know, again, personally with my boys, we've done quite a lot of work engaging with what was called the Baby Lab, and I think now that they're older, I don't know if it's still called the Baby Lab at Birkbeck. And my boys registered to, or I registered them as a keen parent probably, to participate in some of their studies, and they often will reach out to us and say, oh, we're doing a really cool VR study on I don't know, spatial awareness or something like that. And they're often really quite, I think the outreach that they do to families is great. And then they'll feedback about the outcomes in a magazine, you know, for all the different studies that they've done across the year. They have lots of merch that they give away when you've come in for a session, and you know, well, it's quite a fun day out for kids if they're engaging, if they're interested in science. And then they get a certificate to show that they've been engaging in science, which then they took back into school. So I think that sort of approach to recruitment has been effective from what I've observed as a parent of participants. But I think it's probably, you know, there's probably, Sarah probably knows loads more about that side of things.
Well, actually, I can speak on this because I did some of my PhD, and I was recruiting people from schools who were born premature but who were adolescents at the time. And actually, it was an EEG study. And the thing that helped us was using lots of pictures, like visual aids. And so, for instance, we said, you know, we took a picture of the EEG and what you would look like, and if you wanted to, you could have a picture of that, you in that kind of funny cap. It's like a space cap kind of thing, and loads of people loved that. And the fact that they were able to kind of show other people that was a bit different. So there's lots of things obviously they can't do, but social media is a big tool for them. So actually saying, yeah, you can take this quite unique photo, and you know, that's a bit of a launch pad for conversations with their friends. They quite enjoyed that. And the other thing that helped was making them feel included, but also like why it's important for you, and really trying to get that personal message across. Often I think young people respond quite well to that, you know, we're not just asking anyone, we are asking your school, or we're asking you and your family, and kind of really trying to kind of put that personal approach to your recruitment. And again, so that's kind of trying to think about your universal starting point. You know, something like MEG or EEG is quite unusual, but you can talk about like hats, you can talk about astronauts, you can talk about, you know, funny things that you have on your head. So trying to find something that you have, everyone can kind of relate to, and then kind of expand it out and tailor it to your audience would help. I'll be very happy to you're very welcome to message me, and we can talk offline about that.
Super, thank you. Participation is a key one, isn't it? If you've ever been to a children's magic show, or you've ever been to Butlins or a holiday thing where they have a children's entertainer, and watch for the number of hands that go up when there's a chance to kind of go up on the stage. And again, also they're the things that make it memorable. I mean, giving everybody an opportunity to do it, but they, you know, getting children up to the front to interact with them in some way on whatever it is you've got to do is a great idea. And I love the idea of certificates. Wow, you know, I've probably only just released my fridge from certificates that are 10 years old. They stick around forever, and children do love taking a certificate home to show that they were awarded something. We're nearly coming up to time. I had 10 top tips, which I've generated from reading some of our content across our website. And I also spent some time for anybody who's, well, I'll ask one question before we go to the top tips, which is for anybody who's watching this, who's interested in getting involved in that space, do you have any tips? Because there is an interesting stat, which is researchers who take part in public engagement, so not just with children, feel more confident in their communication skills, up to 78% more confident after they do these things. So I think we'd really encourage you to take opportunities to do that. There are organisations like the Diana Award and Into Science UK where you can volunteer to be a mentor to young people. So if you don't have children yourself, you're not getting invited into schools, and the opportunities don't naturally present themselves to you, there are some organisations there in the UK, and I imagine they're elsewhere in the world. We'll post some links with the show notes to do that. But I wonder what tips you'd have and why you think it's important we do this. Rebecca, I'll come to you first.
think it's I often find that going in to talk to children, I'm sometimes a bit more nervous than talking to adults, and it's but absolutely it's really exciting, and you have to go with it, I think, is probably my advice, and to expect the unexpected questions, and you never know where the conversation might go. So I think that's an opportunity to embrace.
I love that it forces you to think a little bit differently, doesn't it? You've got to, and I love any opportunity to get a little bit creative as well, rather than just churning out some slides. You know, any chance to do that is fun. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate my point earlier that you don't need to start off in one of like these big things like me and Rebecca have done. Presumably, you know, this accumulated over lots of experience. I think the best place to start is to join other people who are doing some of this. So joining an existing event. So I'll put some links here, but I know that Alzheimer's Research UK and Alzheimer's Society, you can join as a volunteer as a science communicator, and then they'll tell you, you know, we're at the New Scientist Live, we need some people to help. We are at this event, we need some people to help. So actually just going to those kinds of events where the kind of setup is already there, as it were, and you just have to then talk, not just because that's the hard bit, but yeah, so start small and I guess gain experience that way.
Funny enough, you've just reminded me, I had a request last week. The British Neuroscience Association conference next month in Liverpool, they do like a whole brain thing the weekend before the conference in like the train station and in the city. And I know that they'd asked it. I couldn't do it. But if you happen to be in the north of England, and even if you're not going to the conference, reach out to the BNA. I know they're looking for people for the last weekend of April.
Yeah,
I think
maybe
it is.
there should be somewhere on your website, Adam, where you could kind of curate all of the
Well, they didn't. They only invited me. They didn't kind of put out a general request, but they might do. I'll find that and put that up there. Thank you, Sarah. So these were our top tips. Top tips drawn from the content we have on our website and from what I could find out. So number one was start with curiosity. What would you have wanted to know when you were at their age? And if you don't know, go and listen to children, watch them, not in a bad way, get permission first, maybe get a chance to go to the classroom before, but what would you have wanted to know? Number two, use analogies. Comparing neurons to spaghetti or memory to filing cabinets works wonders. Tell stories, not just facts. Frame your science like a journey, not as a lecture. Number four was be visual. Diagrams, drawings, objects, memes, interaction in some way, getting people busy, talking across their tables and doing things themselves, building things. It can be really help if you've got that interaction. So that's number five, which is keep it interactive. Ask questions, run quizzes, get them doing something. Don't just talk to them. Get the children that are your audience to participate. Be honest about uncertainty. Sarah touched on this as well. In fact, you've covered all my top tips. You've done incredibly well because you've ticked them all. We don't know yet is a great teaching moment to say we don't know yet. And maybe that you could be the one that helps find the answer to that. Number seven is use humor carefully. A laugh makes science stick, apparently. So there you go. Number eight, let them lead. Follow the questions and go with their flow. So if you do, I asked ChatGPT what questions might be asked, and one of the ones was, can you eat brains? And about zombies came up. And so if you suddenly find yourself talking about zombies and eating brains, carefully try to steer it back to where you're going, but go with it. Don't, just dismiss that question. Number nine, partner with teachers and creatives, as you both have done as well, incredibly well. So they know the audience and they can help co-create some real magic. And number 10, don't aim for perfection, aim for connection. Anything you can instill and give them as a takeaway is going to be great. In Tick, you did a good job if you've created a conversation over dinner. Although if your children were anything like mine and they come home at the end of the day and say, what did you do today? They'll say, I don't know. I had no idea. My daughter's school once caught fire. And she came home and said, what did you do today? And said nothing until the Friday newsletter came out to say, we really apologize for the disruption and the smoke and the fire engines. didn't have a clue. So if you can get your children to talk about something at the dinner table, you've done really well. Thank you so much. Rebecca and Sarah, you were both incredible. Thank you so much for taking time out of your afternoon to join us. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining and watching. Sarah has very kindly posted some links in there, and we'll make sure that they're carried across into the recording as well. So good luck. Thank you very much. And we'll see you. We might have to cancel next week. Next week's webinar is about studying with a chronic health condition. But unfortunately, one of our speakers has just cancelled. So if you are watching this now and you are living every day with a chronic health condition and managing to deliver on your research and your studies alongside that, and you're happy to talk about your experiences, do get in touch, because I need to find a speaker for next week's session. And if not, we might delay that till a later date. But thank you very much again, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in the salon. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.